At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. In the end, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it this way. My name's Aurum. Let's begin. The cosmos, Captain Calliope Callie Cross had learned, operated on a strict, no refunds, no exchanges, all sales final basis. She mulled this over as a mobile mountain of furious alien metallurgy attempted to return her ship, the Earth Defense Fleet corvette Scrapwing, to its constituent molecules. Outside the main viewport, the Judgment of Lances hung in the star-dusted blackness. It was less a starship and more a mobile monument to overcompensation, a city-state whose primary export was gratuitous violence. The vessel stretched for 20 kilometers, a shard of weaponized midnight that effortlessly absorbed the combined tantrum of the entire EDF. Bursts of contained plasma, brilliant fusillades of human defiance splashed against its shields in silent, pathetic blossoms of color, like fruit thrown at a fortress wall. Tungsten slugs, accelerated to a significant and very expensive fraction of light speed, pancaked against the invisible barrier and sublimated into glittering vapor, their kinetic fury swallowed with a level of indifference that was, frankly, insulting. On the Scrapwing's bridge, every console shrieked its own unique aria of imminent, catastrophic failure. "Hull integrity yet?" Ensign Davies' voice performed an unscheduled octave jump. 58%? Captain, we seem to have misplaced our dorsal plating on decks 3 through 5. Also, the Steadfast is gone. Just poof. No wreckage. Merely an absence of ship.
"Divert what's left of the galley's power to the aft deflectors,"
Callie ordered. Her voice was a flat, calm island in the ocean of panic. Her grip on the command chair's armrests was tight enough to leave impressions in the worn synth leather, but her face, bathed in the frantic red wash of alert klaxons, could have been studying a mildly interesting nebula.
"Davies, stop looking at the big one. It'll only make you sad. Focus on the gnats. Their fighters are taking the Valiant apart piece by piece."
Strapped into the weapons console, a man-shaped agglomeration of muscle, resentment, and chrome named Breaker grunted. The sound was like two granite blocks being reluctantly introduced. A spiderweb of targeting grids danced across his display, all painting the Judgment of Lances with large, belligerent, and entirely impotent red squares. His cybernetic left eye, a sapphire lens that saw in 6 different spectra of violence, whirred softly as it failed to find a weakness. He thumped a chromed fist on his console, a percussive expression of profound frustration that made a nearby yeoman flinch so hard he dropped his datapad. "Can't scratch it!" he growled. The admission was torn from him, a violation of his core programming, both wetware and hardware. "Your point defense is clairvoyant. Slugs are confetti. Lasers are mood lighting."
"Nobody can, Breaker,"
Callie said, her gaze fixed on the impossible warship. The rest of the human fleet, a motley assortment of retrofitted haulers, cranky asteroid miners, and gunships that were never meant to leave the atmosphere, was being methodically disassembled like a child's toy collection. The Triton had been neatly cored by a single beam of incandescent gold. The Dauntless bled its atmosphere from a dozen weeping wounds, a dying beast in the cold dark. This was an execution, and humanity was late for its own funeral.
"Shields are a statistical error, Captain!"
Davies yelped, his voice now a high-pitched keen of pure, unadulterated terror.
"They're peeling us like a ripe fruit out here!"
Callie knew. They had heartbeats left, not minutes. She keyed the ship-wide comm, her thumb pressing the button with the weary finality of someone ordering the same disappointing takeout for the 3rd night in a row. It was time for the Hail Mary, the stupidest, most desperate, most beautifully human idea ever cooked up in a lab full of stimulant patches and despair.
"Callie, to the grease pit. Fenris, the universe is calling our bluff. Light the candle.
Deep in the cramped, chaotic, and perpetually vibrating engine room of the scrap wing, Fenris Volkov snapped his head up from a console that was actively trying to set him on fire. His lank hair stood on end, a state attributed to either the rampant static electricity or the cocktail of stimulants he'd ingested in the last hour. His eyes, wide and luminous with a terrifying intellectual fervor behind a pair of oil-smudged goggles, darted to the comm speaker.
"Captain, no!"
he shouted back, his voice a torrent of panicked consonants.
"They're not rated for interactive deflector field contact. The causality initiator might create a feedback loop. I have no actionable data. The simulations suggest... well, they suggest a great many things, Captain. None of them pleasant, and most of them involved our immediate de-resolution into a beautifully symmetrical but ultimately inconvenient pattern of exotic particles. Light it, Fen!
Callie's voice was a monomolecular scalpel, slicing through his frantic monologue. The words landed squarely in his brainstem, shutting down all non-essential functions, like breathing. He stared at the torpedo launch sequencer, a crime against engineering sensibilities he'd personally bolted to the main reactor's coolant intake. The fracture torpedoes, his children, his beautiful, insane, reality-contorting, probably going to get them all killed children. Reverse-engineered from a fragment of a fold drive that had been pried from a derelict alien ship. They weren't designed to explode in the conventional sense. They were designed to poke a tiny, transient hole in the fabric of space-time. A pinprick, not a punch. With a muttered prayer to the patron saint of reckless innovation, Fenris slammed the protective acrylic cover down over the launch trigger. It was a comically large, candy-red button. He had fought tooth and nail for that specific aesthetic. He mashed it with the heel of his grease-stained hand. The scrap wing convulsed, not with the familiar kick of a missile launch, but with a gut-wrenching lurch, its entire frame shifting 3 meters to starboard without any corresponding thrust, as if the universe had blinked and put it back in the wrong spot. On the bridge, the crew clung to their consoles. On the main viewport, 9 projectiles blinked into being. They didn't burn through space with incandescent tails. They moved like errors in the cosmic code, crossing vast distances without seeming to travel at all. Fenris's console unleashed a shriek of pure electronic agony. Proximity alerts battled with energy readings that violated at least a dozen physical laws.
"Captain, their shields, they're not deflecting the cascade, they're amplifying it!"
He screeched over the comm, his voice cracking.
"The energy field is acting as a focusing lens for the causality initiator. Oh, the event signatures, climbing into numbers I previously thought were purely theoretical."
Out in the silent dark, the 9 fracture torpedoes arrived. There was no flash, no bang. Instead, the points of impact on the Judgment of Lance's shimmering golden shield began to glow with a deep, hungry violet. They didn't bounce, they burrowed, sinking into the energy field and drawing its own titanic power into their reality-warping cores. The effect multiplied 1,000,000-fold in a nanosecond. The shimmering ripples in space-time lost their cohesion. They twisted, tore, and then ripped open, coalescing into a vortex of anti-light, a patch of absolute nothingness that seemed to drink the stars behind it. The Judgment of Lances, the Invincible dreadnought, the mailed fist of the Valorak Dominion itself, flickered like a faulty hologram, its form distorted, stretching and compressing in ways that made the human eye water and the brain throb. The dagger-like silhouette folded, twisted, and then inverted, collapsing inward toward the 9 points of pure negation on its shield. It vanished with a sound that wasn't a sound at all, but rather the sudden, jarring cessation of all other noise, a plink of silence in the symphony of battle. Stillness, a profound, absolute stillness that descended like a shroud, smothering the chaos. The alarms on the Scrapwings bridge stuttered and died, their purpose either fulfilled or rendered utterly moot. The few remaining ships of the Earth Defense Fleet drifted in the black, their weapons cold, their crews staring at the empty patch of space where a mountain range of a warship had been moments before. The starfield behind it was perfect, unblemished, as if the Valorak dreadnought had been nothing more than a bad dream. For a long, breathless moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the life support and Ensign Davies' ragged, shallow breathing. He stared at his sensor screen, which was now a landscape of blessed, terrifying emptiness. Breaker slowly lowered his hands from his console, his cybernetic eyes cycling through thermal, magnetic, and gravitic spectra, trying to find something that had fundamentally ceased to be there. Callie let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. It shuddered from her, a single crack in her iron facade. The comms channel detonated. There were no cheers, just a cacophony of stunned, disbelieving voices from the other EDF ships.
Triton to Fleet Command, requesting a sensor recalibration, and possibly a stiff drink. Did we just win? Where in God's name did it go?
A clipped, authoritative voice sliced through the chatter. Admiral Zhao.
All ships, damage reports. Scrapwing, what in the name of every taxpayer dollar I spent on this fleet did you just do?
Callie tapped her console, her composure snapping back into place.
Admiral, we deployed an experimental deterrent. The hostile vessel has been displaced.
She chose the word with surgical care.
Displaced?
Zhao's voice was a mixture of disbelief and incipient rage.
Captain, a vessel the size of a small moon just vanished from reality. My tactical display is showing a smiley face where it used to be. I need a better explanation than displaced.
Before she could invent one, Fenris's voice trickled over the internal comm, thin and shaky.
Captain,
he whispered. The manic energy bled out of him, replaced by a cold, seeping dread.
That's not what it was supposed to do. The energy cascade, the resonance feedback from their shields, it didn't poke a hole in the ship.
He took a ragged, hitching breath.
It poked a hole under it. We didn't destroy it, Captain. We pushed it sideways into the attic of the universe.
Callie stared into the empty expanse. The chilling realization crystallized in her mind, colder and more terrifying than any Valorak weapon. They hadn't won a battle. They had just rung a galactic dinner bell, announcing the arrival of a species that could make invincible warships disappear. And they had done it by tripping over their own shoelaces. They hadn't just unleashed something far weirder and more dangerous on the galaxy. They had just become it. News travels fast. When brokered by the Argosy Syndicate, it travels at the speed of profit, which is orders of magnitude faster than light. On the bridge of the Scrapwing, now limping its way toward a classified repair depot in the asteroid belt, Callie had the galactic newsfeed playing on the main screen. The crew watched in a state of shared, stunned silence. A multi-limbed Argosy anchor, its voice a smoothed, synthesized purr that could sell sand to a desert nomad, narrated over a slick holographic reconstruction of the battle. It showed the assembled Valorak fleet, a symbol of galactic dominance for millennia, and the pathetic, laughable cluster of human ships. Then, with a dramatic flair that was pure showmanship, it showed the judgment of lances, just winking out of existence. The Argosy had isolated the energy signature left behind, a unique high-energy causality echo that spoke of a physics so heretical it made the established galactic sciences look like cave paintings.
Sources within the Syndicate have traced this unprecedented event to a single vessel.
The anchor purred, and a grainy, unflattering image of the scrap wing filled the screen.
A chemically propelled projectile corvette from the newly contacted species in Sector 7G. A species calling themselves humans.
Chemically propelled? Davies muttered, looking offended. We're famous.
Infamous.
Breaker corrected him, his voice a low rumble.
There's a difference.
The montage cut to other reactions. A grim-faced Ashtil hegemony general, a member of a proud, stoic warrior race whose faces looked permanently carved from granite, stared at the data with an expression of profound respect and even deeper alarm. He spoke in his guttural tongue, the translator overlay flat and clinical.
A weapon that does not destroy, but unhappens. This is not an instrument of war. It is a tool of celestial editing. The humans have become a cosmological predator overnight.
Then came the Valarak Dominion's official statement. A high-ranking minister, his face a mask of quivering fury, declared the footage a fabrication, a pathetic digital trick concocted by a cowardly species to hide their inevitable annihilation. It was the galactic equivalent of insisting you hadn't been knocked unconscious, you'd merely tripped and were resting your eyes on the canvas for a moment. No one was buying it. The judgment of lances was gone, and the Valarak Empire, for the first time in 1,000 years, looked vulnerable, humiliated. Earth had gone from a backwater nuisance, a planetary system ripe for conquest, to the galaxy's resident boogeyman. They were the terrifying new player with an erasure weapon, the unpredictable primates who had brought a metaphysical crisis to a laser fight. Callie switched off the feed. The bridge was still.
So,
she said to the room at large, a dry, humorless smile touching her lips.
we're a galactic superpower now. Congratulations. Try not to let it go to your heads.
Days later, the galaxy came calling. They were running dark, making patch repairs in the deep black, when 3 blade-like ships materialized from nowhere. They were sleek, silver, and radiated a quiet, deadly competence. Ashtil warships. They didn't fire, they simply boxed the scrap wing in, maintaining a conspicuously large buffer distance, as if they were afraid the little human corvette might sneeze and accidentally delete them from the current timeline. The bridge of the scrap wing went to high alert, but Callie ordered her crew to stand down. Breaker had his hands hovering over the weapon controls, a low growl rumbling in his chest.
They're hailing us, Captain,
Davies said, his voice taut.
on screen.
The face that appeared was rugged and noble, belonging to a creature who looked like he'd been chiseled from a block of honor and gravitas. Heavy brow ridges, piercing dark eyes, and a formal set to his jaw. The Ashtil insignia on his collar identified him as Commander Borak.
Captain Calliope Cross of the Earthship Scrapwing.
Borak began, his voice a deep baritone that felt like it had its own gravity. He didn't sound hostile. He sounded reverent.
The Ashtil hegemony extends its profound respect to you and your formidable crew. We would be honored if you would join us for a diplomatic conference on the neutral station, the Gutter.
It was phrased as an invitation, but the 3 cruisers aimed at her hull made it clear it was a command, wrapped in the most exquisite politeness. Borak and his crew were treating them with the cautious deference one might show a toddler holding a live thermonuclear device. They were terrified. Callie's mind raced. They were out of miracle torpedoes. Their ship was held together with hope and emergency sealant. Their only weapon was a bluff the size of a gas giant. Time to see how far it would take them.
"We accept your invitation, Commander,"
she said, her voice a sea of calm and professional courtesy.
"We'll see you at the gutter."
The gutter was a classic deep space entrepot, a sprawling, chaotic tangle of rotating rings, docking pylons, and jury-rigged habitats, home to smugglers, merchants, mercenaries, and the occasional desperate diplomat. It smelled of ozone, exotic spices, and poor life choices. As the battered little scrapwing glided toward its assigned berth, Callie could feel the eyes of the station on them.
Docking control to EDF Scrapwing.
A nervous voice crackled over the comms. The station controller, a four-eyed arachnid-like creature, was audibly sweating.
You are cleared for landing bay 94 Gamma. It's isolated for your privacy.
For everyone else's continued existence, you mean?
Breaker grunted from beside her. He was right. They were being quarantined. As they maneuvered the Corvette into the hangar, other ship's crews stopped what they were doing to stare. A hulking freighter pilot physically recoiled, yanking his loading drone back as if the scrapwing might be contagious with reality failure. The feeling only intensified when they disembarked. Callie, Fenris, and Breaker headed for a supply depot, a necessary chore before their diplomatic meeting. They passed a crowded cantina, the sound of raucous laughter and alien music spilling out. Breaker, in his heavy combat gear with his glowing cybernetic eye, stepped through the doorway first, just to scan the room. The entire bar went dead silent. A table of loud, boisterous Valorak mercenaries who had been drunkenly boasting moments before suddenly found their drinks to be the most fascinating objects in the known universe. A trio of insectoid gamblers froze mid-deal, their multifaceted eyes fixed on the table. The bartender polished a single spot on a glass with the laser focus of a bomb disposal expert. Callie felt the weight of their reputations settle on her shoulders. They weren't just a crew anymore. In the eyes of the galaxy, they were walking, talking doomsday devices. Before they could even reach the Ashtil delegation's designated sector, they were intercepted. An Argosy syndicate member slid out of an alcove, his movements unnervingly fluid. He was tall, thin, and wore a suit that shimmered with a subtle energy field, probably costing more than the Scrapwing's entire operational budget. His smile didn't reach any of his four constantly shifting eyes.
Captain Cross, a distinct pleasure. I am Vreen, an ambassador for the Argosy Syndicate.
He gestured with a three-fingered hand toward a luxurious private lounge.
If you would grant me a moment of your time.
Callie knew an Argosy's moment was never just a moment, but she was curious. Inside, Vreen offered them synth ale in elegant, self-chilling glasses and launched into his pitch. He offered them wealth, advanced technology, a military alliance, and protection from all their enemies, real or imagined, all in exchange for one little thing: the schematics for the fracture torpedo. As Vreen spoke, Fenris was completely checked out. His eyes darted around the room, absorbing the silent, shimmering holographic emitters, the elegant power conduits humming softly behind frosted glass panels, the phase conjugate architecture of the air purifiers.
"Incredible,"
Fenris muttered, oblivious to the high-stakes negotiation happening a meter away.
"They're using a nested Faraday cage to stabilize the particle stream. That's brilliant. If we could adapt that for the causality initiator's containment field, we could increase the yield by at least 2 orders of magnitude without risking a premature reality cascade.
Callie saw it, the intense, unguarded focus on his face. He was a genius. But he was a genius who thought out loud, with no filter between his brain and his mouth. He could give away their one and only secret without even realizing it. The secret being that they had no idea how it really worked and had gotten stupendously, cosmically lucky. She cut Vreen off mid-sentence.
We're not for sale,
she said, her voice colder than the vacuum outside. Vreen's smile tightened, a barely perceptible shift.
A pity,
he said, his multiple eyes finally focusing on her.
Alliances are so much cleaner than acquisitions. Secrets have a way of getting out or being extracted.
New orders,
Callie said as they left the lounge, her voice low and hard.
Fenris, you are permitted to look at the shiny things, but if you open your mouth to say anything more complex than "where's the restroom," I will personally weld it shut. Breaker, you're his shadow. Don't let him talk to anyone who looks too smart or too rich. This whole station smells like credits and treachery.
Breaker grunted his assent. It was a role he was born to perform. While Fenris was utterly captivated by a back alley stall selling illegal fold drive modifications, it happened. One moment he was admiring the raw, terrifying beauty of an exposed singularity core. The next, he was being dragged into a grimy, dripping service corridor. A hulking, four-armed bounty hunter, a species known for their brute force and lack of conversational skills, slammed him against the wall.
The syndicate pays well for smart little monkeys,
the alien growled, one of its massive hands closing around Fenris's throat. Before the bounty hunter could apply pressure, Breaker melted out of the shadows behind him. There was no warning, no sound. One moment he wasn't there, the next he was a problem the bounty hunter was having. A brutal, close-quarters brawl erupted. It was a visceral, ugly clash of metal and flesh. Breaker moved with a terrifying, compact lethality that belied his size. He used one of the bounty hunter's own arms as a shield against a plasma pistol shot, the searing heat washing over his reinforced torso without effect. His augmented limbs were a blur, parrying vibroblades with the reinforced edge of his forearm, his knuckles cracking against the alien's chitinous jaw. The fight ended as quickly as it began. Breaker drove a massive combat knife up under the bounty hunter's ribcage, twisted, then shoved the gurgling alien into a pile of refuse containers. He was breathing a little heavily, but was otherwise unharmed. He turned to Fenris, who was leaning against the wall, hyperventilating. Breaker's cybernetic eye scanned him for injuries. Finding none, he reached into a pouch on his belt, pulled out a protein bar, and tossed it to the terrified engineer. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The message was clear. The galaxy wasn't just watching them anymore. It was actively trying to gut them for parts. Back on the relative safety of the scrap wing, Fenris was a whirlwind of frantic activity. He was hunched over his primary analysis console, poring over the sensor data from the initial battle.
It just can't be noise,
he muttered, his fingers flying across the holographic interface.
An event that's energetic, that fundamental, it has to leave a resonance.
He was focused on the causality echo, the unique signature their accidental weapon had left behind. Buried deep within the background radiation, he'd found something, a faint, repeating signal. He spent hours filtering it, running it through every translation matrix he had, certain it had to be a distress call. He peeled back layers of interference, his excitement growing. The signal was getting cleaner, more defined. He could almost make out a voice. He ran one final decryption algorithm. The static fell away. For a split second, A distorted, hate-filled voice in the Valarak language cut through the speaker, clear as a bell.
We'll burn your world to cinders.
It was Vorlag. Fenris recoiled from his console as if he'd been electrocuted. His blood ran cold. He stumbled back, his hand flying to his mouth, a strangled gasp escaping.
Alive!
He whispered to the empty engineering deck. His mind reeled with the impossible, horrifying truth.
Alive! And they're broadcasting their vengeful thoughts across dimensions.
The bridge of the Judgment of Lances was a hellscape of red emergency lighting and the groaning of stressed metal. Grand Marshal Vorlag, his face a thunderous mask of rage, smashed a console with his armored fist, sending a shower of sparks into the air. Outside the main viewport, there were no stars. There was only a nauseating, non-Euclidean chaos of twisting light and impossible geometry. Colors that had no name swirled in fractal patterns that hurt the brain to look at. This was the subfold, the space between spaces. The mighty warship was trapped in a prison of broken physics, but it was not destroyed. Its powerful structural integrity field and reality anchors held, creating a small, fragile bubble of stable reality in the heart of the madness. Sub-Commander Crix stood at his station, his posture rigid, his expression grimly professional.
Marshal, the internal fields are holding at 92%, but they're draining our core reserves at an alarming rate. We cannot maintain this stability indefinitely.
Vorlag ignored him, his eyes fixed on the chaotic vista.
Report!
He bellowed. A science officer spoke up.
We can detect the source of the event, Marshal. The primitives, they left a scar in reality. A lingering weakness in the dimensional wall.
A slow, predatory grin spread across Vorlag's face.
They left a door,
he snarled.
They were arrogant enough to leave us a door.
He turned to his crew, his voice booming with renewed purpose.
We will not just escape. We will tear our way back through the very wound they gave us. We can force it back open.
Marshal, if I may, Crix interjected. Our readings suggest the scar is an energy trap. Forcing it could destabilize our own reality anchors and destroy us.
Your caution is cowardice, Crix,
Vorlag roared.
My honor demands retribution. My very soul demands it. To be erased from the histories that I will not allow. We will return, and their world will be the pyre upon which I reclaim my glory.
For Vorlag, survival was now secondary. His all-consuming need for vengeance was the only thing holding his fractured sanity together. Fenris laid out the horrifying discovery for Callie and Breaker on the Scrapwings Bridge. The audio file of Vorlag's promise echoed in the quiet room.
They're alive, they're angry, and they're trying to claw their way back,
Fenris finished. Breaker crossed his heavily muscled arms.
Good,
he grunted.
let them rot.
We can't,
Fenris said, bringing up a complex simulation on the main screen. It showed a shimmering, unstable bubble of energy.
The torpedo didn't create a stable pocket dimension. It's a wound, a tear in space-time, and reality is trying to heal itself.
He pointed to a blinking red timer.
My models show the dimensional rift will collapse in less than a week. When it does, all the mass and energy were crammed in there,
An entire Valrak dreadnought, its crew with singularity core, will be violently ejected back into our universe.
Callie stared at the simulation.
It won't come back as a ship.
Fenris shook his head.
It'll come back as a supernova of pure spite that could scrub this whole sector clean. We're sitting on a time bomb of our own making. We have to get them back here, now, where we can control the outcome.
They had to save their greatest enemy to save themselves. Fenris paced the engineering deck, muttering to himself, sketching equations on a datapad. The plan he formulated was equal parts brilliant, insane, and pure Fenris.
We have to fish them out, he explained. If we hit the causality scar with another fracture event, we can pry the wound back open for a few seconds, long enough for them to come through. It'll be like chumming the water for a very, very angry shark.
Callie stopped his pacing.
We fired 9 torpedoes, Fenris. The manifest said we had 10. Is 1 enough?
Fenris froze, a sheepish, guilty expression crossing his face.
Well, yes, officially we have 1, but I might have another.
He led them to a forgotten corner of his workshop. Under a greasy tarp was the unmistakable shape of a torpedo. It was uglier than the others, covered in diagnostic ports and exposed wiring.
D01,
Fenris said, pulling the tarp away.
The original prototype. I kept it against, every regulation. It's unstable. The targeting is a nightmare, and it leaks low-level chronoton particles, but the yield, the theoretical yield, is much higher.
Callie stared at the rogue torpedo. Then she stared at Fenris. Her expression was a perfect mixture of white-hot fury and profound relief.
Volkov?
She said, her voice dangerously calm.
One of these days, you are going to be the death of me. But it looks like it won't be today.
Callie requested a private, face-to-face meeting with Commander Borak. She met him in a Spartan conference room aboard his flagship, the Blade of Intent. She laid out a carefully constructed, partial truth.
Commander,
she began.
Our weapon is a tactical transport device. We displaced the judgment of lances, and now they are about to return, enraged and unpredictable.
She leaned forward.
I am proposing an alliance. Help us set a trap for them when they return, and the Ashtil hegemony can share in the glory of destroying the flagship of your greatest rival. We will bring the beast to the killing ground. You will help us butcher it.
Borak was skeptical. His gaze was intense.
Your weapon makes fleets disappear. Tell me, Captain, can it make a star disappear?
Callie met his gaze without blinking.
We haven't found anything it can't.
The sheer, unadulterated confidence of her bluff hit him. That, combined with the strategic logic of eliminating the judgment of lances, was enough. A slow smile spread across his rugged features.
We will hunt with you, human,
he declared. He brought up a star chart.
And I know the perfect killing ground. The Azure Nebula. Its dense electromagnetic interference will hide our fleets. They will be blind when they emerge.
Inside the swirling, ethereal blue clouds of the nebula, the tiny Scrapwing and 3 massive Ashtil cruisers lay in wait, silent and dark. In engineering, Fenris was a blur of motion, frantically jury-rigging the prototype torpedo to the ship's primary power conduits, bypassing safety protocols that existed for very good reasons. On the bridge, Callie stood at her command chair, watching the swirling azure clouds. In the armory, Breaker was methodically sharpening a massive combat knife on a magnetic whetstone, a silent promise of the violence to come. Callie ran through the battle plan one last time with Borak over a secure channel. All they needed now was the bait and the monster. On the bridge of the Judgment of Lances, alarms blared.
Marshal, a stable, high-energy signature has appeared on the other side of the scar.
An officer reported.
It matches the causality echo of the human vessel.
Sub-Commander Crix's head snapped up.
It's a trap, Marshal,
he stated.
They are baiting us.
But Vorlag, consumed by his lust for revenge, saw only his prize. He laughed, a harsh, barking sound.
The primitives are arrogant. They think they can control their newfound power.
He bellowed.
They offer us our revenge on a platter. Full thrust, tear a path back to glory, and burn their pathetic world to ash.
The mighty warship charged. A violent, jagged tear ripped open in the heart of the nebula. The colossal, battle-scarred form of the Judgment of Lances surged through, its weapons already glowing. Vorlag's voice, full of triumph, booming hatred, cut through all communications channels.
I have returned from the hell you cast me into. Now I shall bring that hell to you.
Callie leaned into her comms, her voice a calm, deadly whisper.
Light him up.
The Azure Nebula erupted. The Ashtil cruisers and the Scrapwing unleashed an overwhelming barrage. The Judgment of Lance's shields buckled, but held. Its return fire was devastating.
Their targeting is too good. Fenris, I need a path.
Callie yelled.
Feeding you their targeting cycles now.
Fenris's voice shot back.
They have a predictive algorithm, but it's got a flaw. There's a blind spot in the coverage every 1.7 seconds, but it's only a few meters wide. The trench is 12 kilometers long, Captain. You'll have to make several successful evasions to reach the vent.
Callie didn't hesitate. She pushed the Scrapwing's engines past every safety limit. She weaved an impossible path. Fenris's voice was a constant stream of numbers and vectors in her ear. Plasma bolts seared past the cockpit. 1.7 seconds. A flicker of hope. She threaded the needle.
Breaker, keep them busy!
She ordered. Breaker became a whirlwind of destruction. Manning the ship's point defense cannons manually, he bypassed the targeting computer, his cybernetic eye and augmented reflexes doing the work. He tracked and blasted away at the Valorek ship's turrets with inhuman speed, giving Callie the opening she needed. She saw it, a long maintenance trench leading directly to an exposed, glowing drive core vent. She dove the Scrapwing into the trench.
Almost there!
Fenris shouted.
I've got a solid lock on the drive core vent!
Callie lined up the shot.
Fire!
The lone, unstable prototype torpedo streaked away. It didn't aim for the thick hull plating. It dove straight into the exposed vent of the Valorak drive core. It didn't explode. T-01 latched onto the core's housing and unleashed a single, focused pulse of spatial distortion. It wasn't a bomb, it was a tuning fork. It struck the exact resonant frequency of the Valorak singularity core, creating a feedback loop of impossible physics. The reality warping engine turned inward. The Judgment of Lances shuddered violently. Its lights flickered out. From the core outward, the mighty warship began to dissolve, not into fire and shrapnel, but into a silent, beautiful, incandescent lattice of light. Its physical form unraveled, its atoms breaking down into pure information, which then collapsed in on itself. It was an implosion of physics, a silent, breathtaking spectacle of annihilation that left absolutely nothing behind. The battle was over. The crews of the remaining Ashtil ships watched in stunned, reverent silence. On the bridge of the scrap wing, Callie leaned back in her command chair, the adrenaline finally fading. Fenris stared at the empty torpedo launcher on his screen. They had done it. They had faced the impossible twice and won. They had cemented humanity's godlike reputation, and they had just fired their last miracle. Callie let out a slow, deliberate breath and allowed a small, tired smirk to touch her lips. "Well," she said to her exhausted, triumphant crew, her voice echoing in the sudden silence. "I guess we're not bluffing anymore." The statement hung in the air, heavier and more real than any tungsten slug. For a moment, the only reply was the gentle hum of the life support and the distant, mournful groan of stressed metal settling. Then, Ensign Davies, who had begun this fight with a voice several octaves higher than regulation, let out a long, slow breath. He ran a trembling hand through his hair, but when he spoke, his voice was steady as bedrock. "All hostile contacts are gone, Captain. The space where the judgment was is clean. Cleaner than vacuum. The Ashtil ships are holding position, just watching." Breaker stood up from his console, the hydraulics in his augmented limbs hissing softly. He walked over to the viewport, the massive cyborg dwarfed by the swirling azure nebula outside. He didn't look at the empty space where the enemy had been. He looked at the reflection of the battered bridge and the crew still at their stations. He turned, his sapphire eye whirring as it focused on Callie.
Not bad, Skipper.
He rumbled. It was the highest praise anyone had ever heard him give. A crackle from the comms heralded Fenris, his voice no longer a screech of terror, but a breathless torrent of pure, unadulterated scientific ecstasy.
"Captain! Oh, you have to see this data. The cascade was perfect, contains no dimensional blowback, no residual chronoton leakage. The prototype worked better than the production models. I can make the next one stable and smaller. Captain, I think I can build one that fits on a fighter. We can weaponize causality on a tactical level. Can you imagine? Can you?"
Callie allowed herself a genuine smile, the expression feeling foreign and welcome on her tired face. She looked at Fenris's frantic avatar on the comms screen, at Breaker's quiet nod of respect, at Davies' newfound steel. They hadn't just survived, they had been forged. Before she could answer Fenris, a priority call cut through. Commander Borak's chiseled face appeared on the main screen. He wasn't looking at Callie. He was looking past her, as if he could see every member of her crew, every circuit and weld of her impossible little ship. The Ashtil warrior, a being carved from honor and gravitas, looked utterly, profoundly shaken.
Captain Cross,
he began, his deep voice hushed with a reverence usually reserved for gods or cosmic phenomena.
The hegemony archives speak of legends, races that could shatter planets, empires that could extinguish stars, but we have no stories for this.
He gestured vaguely at the empty space.
You did not just destroy a warship. You You unwrote it from existence with a single shot from a ship held together with, by my scans, courage and engine tape. Callie leaned forward in her command chair, the worn synth leather creaking. Her exhaustion was a physical weight, but her spirit was soaring. She looked at the stoic alien commander and saw the face of the entire galaxy staring back in awe. "We had a problem, Commander," she said simply, her voice carrying the calm weight of absolute victory. "We solved it." Borak was silent for a long moment, his piercing eyes searching hers. A slow, incredulous smile spread across his rugged face. "Other species solve problems,"
he said, his voice resonating with a newfound truth.
"You humans, you find the fundamental laws of the universe that are causing your problem, and you solve them instead."
He gave a short, sharp nod of ultimate respect. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge crew of the scrap wing alone in the quiet heart of the nebula they had made their own. They were a tiny, battered corvette adrift in the vast, hostile dark. But they, and the species they represented, were no longer the underdogs. They were the storm. They were the anomaly. The galaxy had finally learned the most vital lesson about the loud, stubborn primates from Sector 7G. When their backs are against the wall and all hope is lost, they don't just find a way to fight back, they find a way to break reality itself.